Let's talk Donnie Freeman and expectations. What is realistic for this young man? As we said, he finishes, number 6, top recruit in the country in ESPN's, latest rankings. What is realistic in your mind?
I think if you look at somewhere in the 6 to 8 rebounds per game, 7 to 11 points per game, you feel pretty good about him having a solid freshman year. And I think the biggest thing is you want him from a physical standpoint to not look overmatched. And, that's oftentimes part of the biggest adjustment. It's not, he knows how to play basketball. We know his skill set, and he's extremely talented, and he's long and all of those things. But when you go from high school, even at, higher levels like IMG Academy and things like that, and you go to playing in the ACC, the physicality, you're playing against guys that are older than you instead of your same age or younger, and that can be an adjustment from a physical standpoint. So his ability to not look overmatched physically against some front court guys that are going to be a little bit older than him, I think will be the biggest key for him. But I could see him starting slow out of the gates and then sort of by early to mid-conference play really start stepping up his game, and almost similar to what JJ did last year in terms of his shooting and his scoring. I could see him kind of taking a similar arc in sort of getting used to things early on. But listen, he's unbelievably talented. It wouldn't shock me if he surpassed those numbers, and wouldn't surprise me if he had a couple of games early where he had some major moments where he flashed his elite ability.
I was looking at the schools he visited. There's no blue bloods like Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke. There's good schools like Alabama, Iowa, and Texas on there. Why was he not on the radar of the Kentuckys and Dukes and North Carolinas?
Well, sometimes I think the recruiting rankings can play a part in that. And when Syracuse was recruiting him, he wasn't poorly rated by any means, but he wasn't a top 20 player in the class. He was, a top 50, top 60 type of player. And sometimes I think some coaching staffs will look at a player and say, we think he's really good, but his recruiting ranking isn't high enough, and I don't want to deal with the repercussions if I take a guy like that. So, maybe some of them didn't recruit him as hard as a result. It could also be they looked at him and said, maybe he's not a fit for what we like to do or what we like at the 4. They have other things in terms of their roster makeup. They're recruiting other guys. And, sometimes with a school like you look at Kentucky, you look at Duke, they're recruiting, the top 1 or 2 players at every position, almost every recruiting cycle. And sometimes when you're going after those guys, other players that are ranked 5th, 6th, or 7th at the position are down your board. And by the time you're ready to move on to a player like that, it's kind of too late because other schools have established themselves. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. Everybody can't recruit everybody, and then sometimes players blow up late, and some of those bigger schools miss out on them.
All right, Syracuse has a couple of really good freshmen coming in, a couple of really good transfers. Everybody wants to know who's the point guard on next year's team. So, bring us up to date and the latest on the Dakota LaFew watch from what you understand.
So he's visited Syracuse, he visited South Carolina, he visited Villanova, and I don't know if his visit to Georgia has wrapped up or not, but I know he was on the Georgia campus. He put some stuff on his Instagram story within the last day or two from being at Georgia. So he's been to those 4 schools, and I don't think he's going to be taking any other visits, so we should be expecting a decision sometime soon. I think the momentum with him in Syracuse, especially with them hiring his former head coach, that's dwindled a bit and seems to have been faded more and more the further he gets away from the Syracuse visit. There was a brief glimmer of hope after he visited Villanova because Villanova had started going after some other guards, and yet nothing materialized between him and Villanova. And then with the fact that they were going after other guards, the thought was maybe that pushes him back to Syracuse, but then he took the South Carolina and Georgia visits. So, how much is Syracuse able to offer from an NIL standpoint compared to those other schools? That's a giant question. He's also originally from Georgia. So, does that mean going to the hometown team gives them a little bit of an edge? There's still a lot up in the air. There's a lot of speculation, nothing really concrete. But Syracuse is still firmly in the mix there. But it wouldn't be surprising to me if they were exploring some other options right now.
Is there anybody else on the radar at the point guard position for them?
The one guy that I'll mention is Jaquan Carlos from Hofstra. He's not going to be as flashy or as sexy of a name. You know, he's only about 6'6", as opposed to 6'5" from Dakota LeFew. But he is, in every sense of the word, a pure point guard. He is a pass-first, set up your teammates, distributor. Averaged over 6 assists a game last season. Shot about 36% from three, I believe, last year. He's a good player and would be a steady, calming influence, I think, on the team. He's got multiple years of starting experience. So I think he would be a good option for sure. I know there were some Syracuse fans that I've interacted with that he was kind of their top choice because they think he would be a good fit for what Syracuse has on the roster already. But he's the main name that that Syracuse has been linked to that I would pay attention to. Otherwise, they could be trying to see who hops in the portal between now and May 1st and see if there's anyone else that entices them.
Mike, if they get a point guard, what is the scholarship situation for Syracuse after signing a point guard?
I believe they'd still have one or two more available. I know they'd have at least one, but if my numbers are correct off the top of my head, I think they'd be able to grab one more after that. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to, but they'd have the potential to. And I know that there's been, some, I guess, rumors that Syracuse has reached out to a couple of other forwards that have been in the portal. The problem is Syracuse's forward spots are pretty well locked up. The big question is, who do you have to back up Chris Bell? And I think most people would hope that Chance Westry can be healthy and can give you some time at the 1, the 2, and the 3. But the problem is he hasn't been healthy in several years. So how much do you rely on that? I think Syracuse would love to have someone that they feel could come in and be a solid backup to Chris Bell at the 3. The problem is grabbing someone out of the portal who is coming in and would willingly take that type of a role. Most often you have people who had that role and want more of a role, or you had people who were starting at a lower level who still want to start but at a higher level. So, that might be something that they're not able to grab until down the line when, a lot of spots have filled up and some of these guys that entered the portal are still available and are just kind of scrambling to find a roster spot somewhere.
It's our first chance to talk to you since Malik Brown officially committed to Duke. What's your take on that whole situation, and how surprised are you that he's going to be a Blue Devil?
Well, when it happened, the most ironic thing I thought was if Duke had gotten Malik Brown out of high school, Duke fans would have revolted because he was a 3-star prospect, not very highly regarded, not very highly recruited, not very highly ranked. And so, there would have been a lot of Duke fans that would have not understood why they went after him and been upset with the fact that they did and thought they were taking, a downturn in their recruiting. And yet, just a couple of years later, and it's like, oh, this is a guy that can come in and start here now. So I think it tells you that Syracuse did a really good job scouting and finding him. But it's also disappointing because when you are Syracuse and you're not a Duke and you're not going out and getting, 3 5-stars every recruiting class and the top transfers at the key positions you need every single offseason, you need guys that are a little bit under the radar that you can bring in and end up playing way above what they were originally thought of. And Malik Brown was certainly one of those guys. And the fact that you then lose him to a blue blood, to a Duke, is, especially in conference, is certainly understand that a lot of Syracuse fans that are disappointed with that. But, it is what it is. He's going to go there. I think he's going to have a really good year for them. I think he's going to be a really good piece for them and gives them something I think they were missing on last year's team. And it's going to be real interesting to see what happens when he comes to the Dome. It's not going to quite be the same type of situation as what it was when Joe Girard came back, but those type of situations are going to become more and more common, and there'll be a little extra buzz for it for sure.
Mike, do you have any insight into what led to him leaving? Was it a money thing? Was it the fact that the guy that recruited him and the head coach he came to play for are both gone? What went into the fact that he left Syracuse?
I don't know that you can say it was definitely just this one thing. I'm sure all of those things played into it, right? The fact that the guy that recruited him isn't there, the fact that Syracuse has a McDonald's All-American coming in at his position, I'm sure those played a factor in it. But ultimately, my understanding is he was pretty happy here. He liked the coaching staff, he liked his teammates, and all of that. And ultimately, when you become an All-ACC defensive player, defensive team type player, and you impact the game as much as he did, coaches around the league recognize that, around the country recognize that. All of a sudden, you have a lot more options to make money. I don't know if Malik Brown is an NBA player or not. I would lean towards, perhaps not. But, he still has the ability to make money and play overseas, I would think. But he's got an opportunity to make a lot of money right now. And so if he hears what those NIL opportunities are in other places and decides, I need to take advantage of that while I can. Syracuse fans can be upset with it. I get it. But I'm not sure any of them wouldn't do the same exact thing. So I think it was probably a combination of a lot of those things. I don't have an answer as far as I know 100% fact this specific thing was it, but generally in these cases it's not one thing that's the one factor. There's usually a variety of things that go into it.
All right, Mike, we're running short on time here, but I do at least want to mention football with you. What stood out to you from this past weekend, whether it was from a recruiting standpoint, from a spring game standpoint, from a big picture, going into next season standpoint? What stood out to you?
So I'll give a couple of things. One, Kyle McCord looked like the real deal. I think they've got a lot of talent at the skill positions. I think it wouldn't surprise me if they went after someone in the transfer portal to try to come in and be Kyle McCord's backup. I think there's a weakness in the roster there. And then from a recruiting standpoint, they continue to be one of the hottest teams in the country. They're up to 9th overall in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings in the country in the 2025 recruiting class. They landed, I believe, 3 more from over the weekend, one of which was a 2026 recruit, which is their 3rd in that class. And that's, it would be a surprise for Syracuse in the past to have 1 in the 2026 recruiting class at this point in that cycle, basically 2 years ahead of time. And they've got 3 already, and 3 very highly regarded players, no less. So I think it just tells you everything you heard about Fran Brown and what he is as a recruiter. All of that has come to fruition. He's putting the evidence behind it, and that it wasn't just the fact that he was at Georgia. It's him. It's who he is, and that's why he's the best in the country at it. And it's very encouraging, and I think giving a lot of Syracuse fans hope for not only next season, but what they're building into the future as well.
And Mike, as we let you go here, where can people find your work?
You can go to CuseNation.com, which is our website on the 24/7 Sports Network, or you can find me on Twitter at McAllister Mike1, or you can find our website's Twitter account at Syracuse on 24/7. All of those areas, all those places you can find us. I'm on Instagram as well. So, all over the place you can find our stuff and interact with us. Send us your thoughts, send us your comments, disagree with me, all of that. We love to do it and love what social media can bring from that aspect.
All right, Mike. Keep up the great work. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys.
Mike McAllister joining us here on the show. With
I wonder
that,
what it's like to have people disagree with you.
You're joking.
I've never had that. I wonder what that feels like.
It happens on a daily basis on this show, and we love it. We'll take a time out here. We'll wrap up hour number 1. We've got Chad Forbes coming up at the top of hour number 2 to talk NFL draft.
Say its name, Steve.
Worst song bracket is next on ESPN Radio.